tell us some of his wonderful stories. So this is our program. And use the microphone or Betty will kill me.
Are we working? No. Hello?
Hello.
Yep.
Again, I'm Ken Ethier. I have my friend Jack Murphy with me, who's been in Auburn for pretty much his whole life, and all but a little bit of time in the military. And we're going to do an interview tonight just to give you some kind of an idea of some of the things that Jack has seen and lived through Auburn. The first question I would have for Jack is, were you actually born in Auburn, and where were you born, if so?
I was born in Auburn. Does anybody know where Home Street is? Look at this. That's how insignificant I was. Home Street is off of Silver. You know where Silver is?
Yeah.
Silver is off of Burnett. There's one house at the end of Home Street. There used to be just one. You can see it from across Stoneville Pond. If you stood in front of the bar there on the other side, it sticks out on the point. I was born in that house. 1932, December 17th.
Could you tell us a little bit about the first school you went to, maybe some of the other schools in Auburn that you went to?
I started at Stoneville School. I was first grade there. I went first 5 grades at Stoneville. Then I was transferred to Judy Bancroft. I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th down there, and then from there I went to St. John's for 2 years, transferred back to Auburn for 2. The first grade was the biggest experience of my life, or the best experience of my life, because I had my cousin for a teacher. And I didn't like her, and she didn't like me, so we get along very good. Matter of fact, I spent more time behind the piano than I did in the classroom. She always would say, if you acted up, she always put you behind the piano. And I used to leave at recess and go home. My mother would march me back to school. That went on also the first grade. Finally, the 2nd grade, I straightened out a little bit. But as you can tell, not very much.
Being that I do know where Home Street is, I was related to the Ethier family that many years ago had a large farm there, that what you would have called a market garden, where they would grow vegetables and bring the vegetables. Well, the biggest export was carrots that they used to bring down to Providence by truck. And I'm going to ask Jack, because I know there are a whole bunch of people from that section of town that didn't have something to do with working there or as a child. I'm going to ask Jack if he did that.
When I was in the 8th grade, they used to let us out of school in the fall, an hour early, if we worked for a layer's farm. We were getting 11 cents an hour, and that was to pull weeds. And I lasted about 2 or 3 weeks over there, and that was about it for me. Mrs. Allaire was rather a strict person. You had to pull the weed a certain direction, or you caught hell for it. So I wasn't one to follow directions. So I was either getting fired or I left. So.
My dad also worked there as a child, much earlier than Jack would have been there, and I remember him telling me it was my mother's side of the family that was related, so he wasn't related at all to them, but he was from the Stoneville section of town and did work there. And I remember him telling me that at lunchtime the fire barn, the whistle would go off, and all the kids would want to stop working, and old Colm Allaire would make them work for an extra couple minutes. He used his pocket watch rather than what the town, I guess he was a pretty tough old guy, but he probably had to be there just to make a living growing and selling vegetables. With that, I would probably ask Jack where the kids would swim around town as children.
Well, when I was young, we had Camp Gleason, so that was where we went. Most of the time, they were at, I think the Rotary Beach was started about that time, or it was a little later. I never went over there anyway. We always went to Camp Gleason because my father worked at the American Steel and Wire. And the American Steel and Wire, the South Works Athletic Association, formed Camp Gleason. They got it as a recreation spot for the workers at the mill. And it was started in 1939 is when they first put it in, or when they first decided to build it. And the first place they were going to put it was in Ramshorn in Millbury. But because there was no transportation to Ramshorn, no bus service, they decided to come back because they owned the land at Camp Gleason, where Camp Gleason is now. And they had the water rights to Moss Reservoir, which is where Camp Gleason is now. Most people think that's part of 80 Pond. It actually is an extension of it. It's called Moss Reservoir. And they owned the land there, and in 1939 they decided to build it. In 1940 they started it, and it was completed in 1941. And just as the war started, and so during the water, we had a good place to swim and a good place to hang around. And I think some of you probably went over to Camp Gleason. I know Sonia did. She used to be over there all the time. But it was mostly for the mill workers. But they only restricted it on weekends. During the week, they just let anybody come in.
Do you have any memories, stories about the hobos that would have lived off the railroad track where the old stone crusher was? Is that in your lifetime? Or
No, that wouldn't
Bill
be
Spencer, is that name?
No.
Okay. So we're going to jump up a little bit, I guess. You said you moved to Auburn Street in 1945?
1945.
Tell us a little bit about that, maybe?
Well, we moved down to Auburn Street in 1945, and I was still in the 8th grade. My mother passed away that year, and I started St. John's High School in 46. And that was an experience in itself. We had to ride the bus from Auburn into Worcester and walk from City Hall down to Temple Street. It was all right in the summertime, but it was terrible in the winter. It was a long hike and it was cold. I lasted 2 years down there again because I was Beck's bad boy. And I didn't get along too well with the brothers down there because they had a different idea. They wanted to be educated and I didn't want it. So we had a little spat over that. I left and went back to Auburn High.
Being that you lived on Auburn Street, did you have anything to do with the train station that was over the other side of Auburn Street there?
Not anything to do with it, but I remember it very well. And I remember the last fellow that was in there was from Rhode Island. He was I guess you know what you call it? The guy that took care of the station. Station master, whatever it was. And he was from Rhode Island. And I can remember Pond Lumber used to have all their lumber shipped in there. They used to get it off the trains, bring the truck down and unload it and put it back in.
Tell us about Pond Lumber. What was Pond Lumber?
Well, Pond Lumber was on the corner of Oxford Street, just opposite Hurd Street. And I don't know actually when it started. I was long before my time that they got going.
I know the Pond family had chickens in a brooder house and some cattle, and then they had a sawmill, and my dad lived again right near there and worked for them as a child. He was born in 1916, and he would talk a little bit about them. They started with a sawmill, and then they started buying wood and selling building supplies, and they probably went out of business, what, 1970 or thereabouts?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, some of these big places, I guess, more or less, put them out of business. Do you have any memories at all of the fire station?
Yeah, when I lived on Oxford Street, Vinnie LaPrade lived upstairs, and he was a fireman. And he used to take myself and his son Billy down to the fire station with him when they get out on Saturdays, hang around down the fire station. And Chief White was always very, very cordial. He was very good to us. There was maybe 6 or 7 of us kids that hung around there. And they let us go to some of the fires. We had to stay inside the pickup trucks. I remember the fire the biggest fire I ever saw in the town was in 1941 when the mill on Main Street burned, the Queensbury Combing Company. That was when they had just bought that brand new fire truck, the one with the big lights on the top. It was a 1941 Maxim pumper. And Johnny Boudreaux used to drive it, for the most part. But I rode in that truck a couple of times when I was a young kid. We used to go out and fight the brush fires too. It was pump cans. If you could pick one up, you could carry it on your back, go out and fight the brush fires.
Did you were you ever involved in any other way in Stoneville and the Ettrick Mill? It was on Main Street or Pondville Mill. Or do you have any memory at all of either one of those places?
I remember the Pondville Mill fire. That was in the mid-40s, I believe. I was hanging around Russell's gas station on Auburn Street. And
What's there now at Russell's?
there's the nursery, I think.
Yes.
It's a nursery school. Yeah, that was just next to where Champagne's Market used to be. Opposite Rockland Road, yeah. And Russell had the gas station there he built it in 1945, I believe. And we hung around there for the next few years until I went into service in 1950.
I understand you worked for the town for a short time. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Kenny, I worked for everybody for a short time. I had about 40 jobs in my lifetime. But yes, I was on the police department when they first put a permanent department on the town. In 1957, there were 5 of us who were on the department. And there's only 3 of us still alive out of the 5 that went on. I lasted 3 years. Again, I couldn't get along with the chief. I was a bad apple anyway. So I left the department and went to work for Shogun Tool and Machine, which is a company that's now out of business. It was over in the industrial park on Sword Street. And they made wire machinery. A lot of people didn't even know that company existed in town. But it was, it shipped stuff all over the world.
When you were in the police department, where was the station? How many cruisers were there? And were they full-time? And was there a dispatcher?
When I was on the police station was right where the high school is now. The highway barn and the police station was upstairs. And we had an old Buick ambulance. And we had one cruiser. It was a Plymouth station wagon. And that was split, the back seat was split in 2/3 and 1/3. So we could lay it down and take a patient from an accident or something into the hospital in the ambulance, or in the cruiser. So we didn't get much use out of the Buick ambulance. And I think the last time that I saw the Buick going out was when John Boudreaux took it out one night and took the whole side of it off of the garage door. And that was the end of the Buick ambulance. But we used we were the medics and the police and the traffic people and everything else at the same time. Because there was only 5 of us on the department. We were getting paid $77 a week, which was probably good money then. Take home about $60. But you had to have a part-time job on the side to survive.
I know just from talking from some other people over the years that before that police station, the Line Street station was built. It was built from the timbers from the Pondville Mill, the ruins of that. But before that, the station would actually have been at Chief Cronin's house on Hill Street. And the children, well, they were children, would remember if somebody got arrested in Auburn, they would be booked right at the kitchen table on Hill Street at the Cronin house. And then they would have been taken to jail in Worcester. So it must have been quite an exciting childhood. And before Chief Cronin on Rockland Road, it was Chief Brayman, and it was also out of his house. And you can, I know the people who live in the house now, you can still see the concrete where the ambulance was housed in his backyard, and they had the tower there for the radios around town. So that it's just amazing how much the town has changed, where some on private property they'd have these things. If we wanted to go a little bit further back than that, the chairman of the selectmen was also the chief of police. So that must have been quite a job. You had some memories of in Auburn of the 1955 flood?
Yes, at the time I was running a gas station on 146 Jack's Amico. And we closed up because there was nobody could get to us anyway. And the tanks were filled up with water. So we closed up, and I came back into the town. And the first thing I came to was Drury Square. The water was up over the road in right by Fuller's garage at the time. And everything was kind of floating around it. And I got a call from my friends at the Worcester Frogman's Club. I was a scuba diver in those days. And they had an Army duck. And they come out and pick me up, and we went down to Webster Square, and we get in around the Mass Electric building in Webster Square, rescued some people out of the house down there. Most of the stuff was in Worcester at the time.
Did you ever have to do any business, get a fishing license or anything like that, when the town clerk's office was actually in the home of Jack and Ethel Riley, which was where the Shell station is now, across from the Auburn Mall? Did you ever go in there, and could you tell us what it was like?
I went in there a couple of times for fishing license. You could get on there any time of the day or night. And Jack and Ethel Riley were very cordial. They opened up the front door, and the glass-stained porch was where the office was. And he would write out a fishing license for you. Especially on the first day of fishing season, he was open all night the night before, because people would forget to get their licenses. And Jack was a very, very cordial person. He was very kind to everybody.
One of my uncles, who's long passed away now, Bob LaPrade, would tell me he remembered waking up at like 3 in the morning the first day of fishing season. He lived near Julia Bancroft on Oxford Street, and walking over, and it was probably like 4 o'clock or thereabouts in the morning, and he knew just which bedroom Jack Riley slept in, and banging on the window, waking him up, and he would actually come up and issue you a fishing license. It's such a different world than any of us could imagine today. Today, I think you'd go away with handcuffs if you did something like that, but back then, that's how things were. How about the coffee cup? Do you remember anything about that? Where it was?
Yes, it was right there at Drury Square. And I remember very well, we used to stop in there quite a few times. And during the day, when we were out in the cruiser, and Evelyn Bartlett's mother used to work there, Maud. And she used to, every now and then in the wintertime, we'd meet Maud walking down the street from her home on Rockland Road, and on the way down to the coffee cup, 5 o'clock in the morning. So we pick her up and take her down, because we always get the first cup of coffee that way. Real sneaky like.
What about the Howard Whitney fire on Southbridge Street? Do you have any memory of that at all? The building supply company?
No, I don't know when that burned either. That was more recent than in the 60s. Yeah, no, I don't have any recollection of that at all.
What about Elo Irish? Do you remember anything about that? Could you tell us where it was and what it was?
Hello Irish was a lumberyard. It was located where the Auburn Motel is right now, which is in back of the Dunkin' Donuts on Southwood Street, across from the Auburn Mall. And Hello Irish, there was one person I remember who used to work for Hello Irish, was Pop Richards. Pop was really a town character, actually. Pop used to work there, and he also had raised pigs on Raythel Street, which was just down the road from the house on Oxford Street. Pop used to go out during the week and collect garbage in his Model T Ford. And on Saturday afternoon, he'd scrub it all out and go to church on Sunday morning. Him and his wife, with his stovepipe hat and his cigar hanging out of his mouth.
Bob Richards was the grandfather of Bernie Branch, one of the members. I think they're probably in Florida now. But a story that I'm always fascinated about Bob Richards. I think one of my uncles told me this story. In the early days in Massachusetts, there were two types of driver's license. One would be a chauffeur's license. One would be an operator's license. Now, in the Model T Ford, you shifted gears with your feet. There was no hand gear shift lever. And in 1928, they came out with the Model A Ford. The Model A Ford was going to have a modern gear shift lever, and you had to get a chauffeur's license. You had to go take a test for a chauffeur's license for that. So Bob Richards got a little bit nervous about that, hearing that story. He went out and bought two brand new 1927 Model T Fords. One he put in his barn, the other he used up until, I guess, World War II or thereabouts. When that one was completely, couldn't move anymore, he pulled the brand new one out. That's all he ever drove in his whole life was, like you just said, the Model T Ford was the only car that old Pop Richards. And he was, if you look through the old town reports and everything, he was a teamster for the town. And he would have been involved in a lot of the road construction, bridges being built. You could see where he had been paid. He was also a teamster, I think, for Hello Irish. And that was, there weren't that many teamsters in the town. Instead of having a truck, you'd have somebody with a team of horses that would do all your jobs for you. Do you remember it all? Yeah, I'm sure you would. The building of the diversion tunnel that went under Packagug Hill.
I was on the police department at the time that was built, and we used to do guard duty down there at night. But they would drill the face of it. I think they missed by a quarter of an inch or something, meeting each other from the Southwood Street side to the Route 20 side. And they would go in and they had a dozer with all these drills mounted around it on a big ring. They would drive that into the face of the tunnel and drill the holes. And they'd pack it with dynamite, pack the stuff out of there, and everybody would get out and they'd blast. Then they'd go back in and do what they call mucking. They would go with these front end loaders that went up over the top, dumped it into the truck. And they did that, I think it was about every 12 hours they had a blast. And they worked 24 hours a day.
And just, I don't know if everybody here knows what the diversion tunnel is. It was built in the 50s, and the reason the Army Corps of Engineers built it, they did a lot of different projects around. After the bad flood of 38 and then 55, Webster Square would be right underwater. The Coast Guard had to go evacuate people. So what the diversion tunnel actually did was, you could control the water, not make it go through Leesville, Curtis Pond down that way. You could send it right under the hill, and it didn't have to flood Webster Square. If there's ever a time when there's a lot of rain, you can actually get down there and talk to the people. It's on Southbridge Street near Bradyville, and there's somebody at the fire station at Webster Square, and they talk back and forth, and they'll tell them when to let the water go down. It's quite an operation, and I've been down there several times. I'm fascinated with anything like that. But it's just, it's amazing that back in the 50s they could build something and have it be that successful that many years. It's big enough that you could drive a truck through it. And some of the problems in the town when they did put it in, it was was so low that there were people from Packagug Hills who, artesian wells would actually lose all the water to get down through there. So there were a lot of problems that went along with that too. Would you have any memory at all of the 38 flood, or was that too early to?
The hurricane of 38. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, the hurricane of 38, we lived on Oxford Street. And we had the shutters on the windows that came to the outside. And my father went out and shut them all except for one that he couldn't get shut. And that was the only window that broke. But I remember there was a family named Getchell who lived on Homestead Ave, right next door to where we were. And their garage roof flew off and it landed right beside the garage on our property. But other than that, there was an old barn across the street from us. It used to sway. Never went down, but some years later somebody burned it. And I was not involved in that. Arson was not my line of work.
Did you have any, you said you'd gone to St. Joseph's Church, do you have any memories, if you would have gone to the old church that's, I think the new one was 53 that was opened up, so you probably went to the wooden one across the street there. Could you tell us anything about that?
St. Joseph's Church was a gathering place for the rest when we were kids. We played basketball in the hall. We had minstrel shows in there too, run by the church. And I never was into minstrel shows, but I used to go to all of them. But also I went to catechism over there, and I think it was on Monday that the storm hit, the hurricane of 38. And we were at catechism, they sent us all home. There was also, if you remember the front of the church, there was two doors that were entered into the church. That was so that the French people could went on the left, on the right rather, and the Irish went in on the left. And that's the way the church was. That was one of the built with two doors.
If you walk through there, you'd also see that they were so segregated that the choir, it was the same thing, the choir, they wouldn't sit on the other side. And one of my dad's cousins told me, Mildred Brule, she lived in town here. As a child, she went in there with my great-grandmother, and we were French-Canadian, and there was plenty of seats on the Irish side, but no seats on the French side. So as a young girl, she was going to go sit on the Irish, and my great-grandmother grabbed her and pulled her back like that. Was just, they were so strong in that belief. It's amazing. Jack, do you have any memory at all of when they built the turnpike, or 290?
The turnpike was finished in 1957, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was the year that I went out to the Department. Prior to that, yeah, I lost a car. My favorite automobile I ever had was a 1949 Mercury. Visor and wheel covers and the whole thing. I was coming up Oxford Street and somebody came down off of where they were building the turnpike. They had ramps. They hadn't had the bridges put in yet. And they were all lighting flares. Come down and broadside of me and T-boned my car right over the side of the bank. And I didn't get hurt or anything, but I was pretty well broken up over the car.
Would you have any knowledge of the truck that was full of dimes that tipped over on the turnpike? Do you remember that at all?
That
Or?
was after my time.
But you still
It
know.
was after my time, but I do remember it happening. I also remember up there with a fire, back of a trailer truck, and the trailer tipped over, burst into flames, and it was full of hockey pucks. There must have been 50,000 hockey pucks in that trailer. And of all places to tip over in the town of Auburn, because they scraped them all off and took them up to the dump. I think every kid in town had hockey pucks.
I remember that as a young child. I remember my cousins, the O'Lears, had a pickup truck full of hockey pucks. Have I forgotten anything, or is there anything else you'd like to add?
One question I got for you. Why was the area that I was born in called the Patch?
the area that Jack's talking about is Burnett Street, Silver Street, that whole, right to the Worcester line from Rochdale Street.
Rochdale,
Yeah. And the reason that they called it the patch is in it was completed in 1839, but when the railroad, was originally the Western Railroad. In 1835, there was a railroad from Boston to Worcester. With that, they wanted to be able to go other places in the state. So they started 2 other railroads that would actually come through Auburn, only because if they drew a line from the 2 places they wanted to be, Auburn was on, there was nothing here that they really wanted, but anyways. And the reason for the patch was the Western Railroad, which would have connected Worcester to Springfield, which would later on become the Boston Albany. The railroad workers were Irish immigrants, and they would build these little shacks over in that area while they were working on the railroad, and they quite often would grow cabbage. So that the patch name just kind of stuck with that. Even when my grandfather, my father would even call that the patch, it's section of town. If you look at some of the early maps, late 1800s, Burnett Street was Patch Road. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not. But it would have been all Irish, and then later on the French would have moved in there too. And that's about the story.
I remember a group of, after the latest farm closed down, a group from the town, young fellas, rented the farm over there. And they had Victor Laird's house, yeah. They rented it out, there was about 5 of them that rented it out. And they had a barber's chair in the middle of the living room. And that's all I can remember about that.
The house that Jack's talking about is the house that Kathy Taylor, the dance studio, that's the woman that owns that now. And I would just tell you a fast and funny story about that house. Again, the Ethiers were my cousins. Arthur Ethier lived on Silver Street where Darlene Wood lives now.
Everybody was your cousin.
Yeah. And Victor Ethier, the other house. And as a child, if I slept in that house where Kathy Taylor danced through, I can't remember the woman's name, I apologize. But if I was sleeping there, my cousins would always tell me, my older cousins, that you could hear Jack Trainer's, he had a wooden leg, and you could hear his ghost walking down the hallway, and I'd always be scared stiff of that. And my Uncle Victor Ethier would say, it was his arm that was missing, not his leg, you damn fool. Well, sometime later, I was researching something in Auburn, and didn't I find that Jack Trainer had a hunting mishap and lost his arm. I think it was the day before Christmas, and they took him into City Hospital and cut his arm off. So it was just kind of that there actually was a person that long ago, and it wasn't all a big story. Well, with that, unless there's any questions or anything, do we have any questions? Yes.
Who was Camp Gleason named for?
Who was Camp Gleason named for?
George Gleason, who was the superintendent of the American Steel and Wire in Worcester. And he's the one that turned his back so that they could sneak out all the lumber out of the mill to build the place with.
Would we have any other questions or comments? Well, with that, thank you very much. You've been a good audience, and hope you enjoyed it.